anyway, I'm totally relaxed doing food demo. I'm glad to say, finally, totally relaxed. But um, but there's not much demo here. This one doesn't really. I don't have any tricks up my sleeve, or well, a little bit, but not really, not really that much to do. So I'm gonna sort of fly through it. I'll give you time to make it with me because I know that's the show, right? Let's cook raw together. But I cheated a little bit and I did my prep. But I'll give you time to prep because everything is super fast to prep. It's super quick. Like, okay, so everybody wash your hands. Like that's about as long as everything takes. Nothing is much longer than that. So, but we'll do the prep. And what I'm going to end up with, we're going to end up with this flaming kale chips on a stick. Now, you may know that there's a lot of different kinds of every plant that we eat. There's thousands and thousands of kinds of apples and 10,000 kinds of dates, and I think almost as many apples, by the way. And the least cultivated plants have hundreds of varieties, but most have thousands of varieties, and that includes kale. So this particular kale is called Cavulo Nero. And I just think it's so much fun to make kale chips. They're not really on a stick. It's really just their own stem, but you probably will eat around the stem and you end up with the stick left over. So I don't know, call them whatever you want to call them. We played around with a lot of names, but that's what it's going to end up looking like. And it's going to be any color you want it to be. I mean, if you add blue-green algae, you could have blue leaves. You could add turmeric and have very yellow leaves. You could add saffron. You can add anything you want to get different colors. You could dip the whole thing in sesame seeds after you're all done, and it'll have that going for it. I've made 100 varieties, maybe more than 100 varieties, and I'm not particularly trying to make them come out the same. Even when somebody says, "Oh, I really like that one, do it again," I probably am not going to do it exactly the same. I'm not trying to. So I don't really care if you use 4 ounces of celery or 8 ounces of celery or 12 ounces of celery, because you have a whole lot of celery. I take one bunch of celery. Now, one bunch of celery could be small, one bunch of celery could be big. I tend to use a lot of celery in my house. Tonight, I'm only using one bunch of celery because I'm not making a lot of kale chips, but I make kale chips 3-4 times a week. And instead, what I want to do is just tell you some of the considerations involved when I make the chips, and specifically when I make these kale leaves. And this one has the color that it does because I was gifted with some beets, and so I made some beet juice, and so we ended up with this deep red. But you can also end up with a red that's almost as deep if you use red bell peppers or Ramiro peppers, which are also the red, long, sweet, pointy ones. And you can make any color you want. I don't really care. If I was going to make them for me, I like curry flavored, and then they come out kind of that color when they're curry. But you can make them any way you want. But I want to tell you some of the considerations. So let's start. You want to get your ingredients together, or hopefully you already have them together. There's zero prep involved in getting your almonds together, right? You've got about 4 ounces of almonds, maybe 2, maybe 6, doesn't really matter, but this happens to be, I've got 4 ounces of almonds. And I've already chopped some tomatoes. So if you want to chop some tomatoes, that would be the thing to do right this minute. While I'm telling you that there are some considerations involved, and we're making a product that we're going to put a sauce onto the product, right? We're going to spread a sauce onto kale leaves. And so if the sauce is too runny, it's going to run off and you're not going to be happy because it's all going to just end up on the tray or worse, or it won't stick at all. If it's too thick, it's going to be hard to spread it. So you're somewhere in between. Fortunately, there's a pretty broad sweet spot of not too thick and not too runny, where you can either apply it or pour it on, or what I'm going to do tonight, I'm actually going to dunk the kale leaves right into my blender so that I make fewer bowls. You could make the sauce, pour it out into a bowl, then put the kale leaves into the sauce, or you could use a spoon and pour it on the leaves. I've tried all these different ways, and at this point now I'm just doing a what you would call a double dip, once on each end. Okay, so do we have tomatoes cut into big chunks? I'm just looking to see if Rachel's going to shake her head. Maybe she'll let us see her pretty face. Right now she's hiding behind her whatever. Oh, you got the tomatoes done? Okay, so tomatoes are done. We're happy. You're also going to want to take what could be your most time-consuming process, which is going to be to prep up some celery in pretty big chunks, because you're going to blend it. You don't have to cut it fine, and you're going to blend it. It's not going to be a problem with stringiness or anything else. They could be 5 centimeters, 2 inches, whatever you like. They could be bigger than that if you want, even depends on your blender. The thing that takes time for most people is you just have to take the celery sticks off the bunch. People do that in different ways. Some people just cut the bottom off and throw it away. It's my favorite part, so I never do that. I always peel each stalk one at a time. That way I get to see what's inside, whether there's life in there, whether there's dirt in there, whether there's damage to the celery itself in there because something crawled up through the middle of the stalk. I can see all that. I take the leaves off. You don't have to. Some people don't like the bitterness of the leaves. Some people say the bitterness in the leaves is harmful to us. I've not been able to find anything that particularly locks that in and tells me, oh yeah, don't eat celery leaves. I've certainly met plenty of people who make soup out of primarily celery leaves. I haven't seen the toxicity particularly did them any harm, but I have no way of, again, doing the experiment to prove it one way or the other. So what do I know? But we tend to take off the leaves, especially the more mature ones. But I prepped it down so there's no leaf matter. I washed off the dirt. It is organic celery, but I'm still not a fan of organic dirt. So I wash this. I at least wash the ends off where I see dirt, and I mean, cleaning celery is a pretty quick process. So hopefully by now you have chopped celery, and I'm seeing heads shaking up and down. That's a huge help. We really only have one more ingredient, which is elective completely, and that is some kind of citrus juice. I don't tend to use sweet citrus like tangerine or orange in these recipes, but I will use lemon, lime, grapefruit. All of those seem to work really spectacularly well, and none are required. It depends how many flavors, how many background flavors you particularly want to get when you bite into the kale. I'm using it tonight. My daughter really likes the lemon flavor in the background. I've made it without, and no one in the family has ever complained. We're sort of, we blow through a lot of kale chips. I myself almost never eat them. my wife and daughter and all her friends always love them. And so I just keep making kale and it just keeps disappearing. I don't know where it goes, but we easily go through 2 to 3 kilos of kale a week in our house. I don't think kale is like the world's best vegetable. I'm not in that mindset. I know some people say, oh, dark green, but I also know that it's super hard to, it's super hard to digest. And so, but in this way, it's not. Once it's dehydrated, it's much easier because it breaks up when you chew it. It breaks up into tiny little pieces, much easier to deal with it. Excuse me 1 second. You are not being helpful. So the kale is a little easier to digest, but it's still not like high on my. I'd rather have celery or lettuce. But because when I make the kale, I'm coating it in a full head of celery and a ton of tomatoes and some lemon. Basically, the kale is just a delivery system for all those other great salad vegetables. So I don't mind making it because it's a great way of ensuring that everybody in the house is getting lots of vegetables, even though we eat a salad almost every night of the week. I would say every night of the week, there's some kind of salad. Tonight we'll have an Israeli salad. Most nights it's a lettuce and tomato salad. Each night it's a little bit different. It's usually got mango in it. But tonight there will be kale chips. There will be lovely kale chips that are I would tell you they were good, but they're so lemon.
Are they flaming?
Not flaming hot. No one in my family likes spicy. No one is a fan of spicy, except for me. And I never was before. That's a new thing. Lately, I've started liking spicy a little bit more. But I'm really particular, and I almost never do it. But I like it. I don't dislike it. I would make these not only flaming in color, I'd make them flaming, put some hot pepper in there, but then Chris Kendall would like them. He's a huge fan of hot. But for me, I'm perfectly content with very mild food. Okay, so we've got celery prep, we got tomato prep, we got almonds prepped. If you were going to juice a lemon or two, this is 2 very juicy lemons, big ones. If you're going to juice your lemon, this would be the time. If you're going to include something like that. I've made plenty of kale chips that were just those ingredients, nothing extra of any kind. But if you want to use something extra, any one ingredient will do. It could be caraway seeds. It could be fennel seeds. It could be cumin. It could be, the list is so long, it's silly. If you're growing basil in your garden or parsley or any ingredient would work. It could be mint. You could use any spice mix. If you're willing to use spices at all, you could use any spice mix from around the world, from some American steak mix to za'atar. I think that would get us from A to Z. And we could, any single one of them would work. Every single one of them would work. Goulash mix, wok mix flavors. It really, they all work. You just put some in. That's your kale mix for that batch. It'll disappear in a couple days at the most. Make more than you think you should. I use the biggest bowl that we have in our entire house to make my kale. And it's about, if I'm making like a chopped loose leaf kale, or I strip the leaves off the kale, I'm usually making 3/4 kilo to 1 kilo of kale in the bowl at once. It barely fits in the bowl. By the time you pour the sauce on top, it packs it down some and it fits in the bowl better, but you still have to be careful mixing. And again, if it's too runny, it won't stick. If it's too thick, it won't mix onto the kale. So those are the considerations that are more important than the flavor. But most of the people that I see make kale chips put so little sauce on that it sort of defeats the purpose to me. I'm not looking for me, as I said, the kale isn't the important part. You don't have to use kale. You could use spinach leaves and it'll come out the same, except spinach leaves stick on top of each other. And so you can't get it separated. That's why curly leaf kale works so well, or this Cavullo Nero works so well, because I only have one layer of kale on the dehydrator sheet. So at this point, we can put things in the blender. The rule for putting things in a blender is the most watery rich things go at the bottom. Fortunately, if you're using liquids, they'll find their way to the bottom anyway. So in a sense, it doesn't matter, but I'm still going to put the nuts in last and put the veggies in first. So let's start with lemon juice. I'm going to tip this down a little so you can see what's happening. You don't need to see me. So I've got lemon juice going in. We'll call this segment the Headless Chef. Let's see if we can get me and I'll hold it up here. Okay. I'm using my special ingredient for tonight by request from my family, more juice of beet. They liked the beet. Everybody commented individually, make more beet kale. Okay. I'm going to add in my celery. Careful not to splash anything or anyone. It's hard to remember to hold this thing up. I'm going to add in my tomatoes. I've got the best part of a blender full, but I could make twice as much kale if I really fill the blender to the max. That's enough sauce for 2 batches. I only have 1 batch tonight, so I'm probably making more sauce than I need, and the leftover sauce is going on tonight's salad. I'm going to throw my almonds in. And this is obviously going to be a very runny mix. And so I'm going to add a little bit of dehydrated tomatoes. I have a great tomato source in my area. And during the summer months when the tomatoes are just popping out, there's a commercial grower near me. When he's growing just fantastic quantities of tomatoes, I dehydrate tomatoes in August, July, August, sometimes even September, but usually just July and August. And I'll dehydrate some tomatoes so that in the lean winter months when tomatoes become a scarce item, I can use dehydrated tomatoes that I've dehydrated. I know what's on them, nothing. And they're clean, they're organic, they're just so delicious, and they were the best of the height of summer tomatoes. And tonight I'm adding dehydrated cherry tomatoes. So I'm guessing at this point, I'm admittedly guessing how much to add, because I don't want the sauce to be too thick, but I don't want it to be too runny. So I'm going to just add what I'm going to call 2 hands full. I could have blended it all once and then said, okay, let's make it a little thicker, add some tomato. But instead, so we have beets, lemon, celery, tomato, dehydrated tomato, almonds. We're good to go, yeah? Does anybody have any questions, comments, anything up till now? You happy up till now?
There is a question, and
Yes.
Rachel is asking what do you do with the pulp after juicing?
After juicing what?
Whatever you juice, whatever
Well, I juiced
vegetables.
lemon, there wasn't any pulp.
Okay.
The beetroot. You said beets?
The beetroot, if I, for stuff like that, I will tend to make a salad dressing right then and there in that night. I'll tend to use it in the dressing. And it just, it obviously adds color and flavor, but it's easy enough to eat. Add some orange to it or add some celery to it, and it becomes salad dressing pretty quickly. I've tried making things like vegetable cookies, and vegetable cookies don't really go over all that well. You can make several different kinds of veggie crackers, so that if you use that beetroot, celery pulp, whatever, if you ever were to juice vegetables, you can take that pulp that's left over and make crackers. And if you guys don't know how to make crackers, I'll show you sometime, but basically you just start with vegetable pulp and add flax seeds, and it hardens off into crackers. You can add a flavor or not. Most crackers don't have a whole lot of flavor. It's what the dip is that you're going to dip them into. But a lot of times I like making my crackers with a whole bunch of flavor and then use a relatively mild dip. So depends on which way you want to go. Okay.
The other question I had was, when you make the dehydrated tomatoes, how long do they store for? How long can you keep them for?
If you really dehydrate them fully, they'll store for a long time. As long as you keep them dehydrated, they will continue to store. I have no trouble getting a year out of them, but I didn't try to make so many that I would need to get a year out of them. By April, we're in full swing again with tomatoes. So I really only need to get through the winter months using a little bit of dehydrated tomato here and there in a salad dressing to thicken it or flavor it, or in a sauce, or in something like this tonight. So I'm not trying to make a lot, but they will keep a long time. If you were in a rush and you didn't fully dehydrate them, within a few weeks they will go moldy and you'll throw them all away.
Yeah, no, whenever I've done them, I will only soften them for maybe an hour, and then I just can't resist and I eat them. So I never get to the full dehydrated.
Yeah, there's that too. Well, yeah, that's why I do it in the height of summer when we're just drowning in tomatoes. So there's really no problem. And that way I'm just like, the other thing that I do to stop that problem from happening, because I have little elves in my house that eat the tomatoes right off the dehydrator as well, is after everybody goes to bed, I put them in the dehydrator, and then they go all night. And I don't, by morning, they're pretty much done. All right, so we're going to take this. I'm going to run it over to my blender, which there's no magic there, but maybe you can see my blender. I'm not even going to bring it over. There was no point. That's really not a big show. And it's a pretty quiet blender, but the magic of television. Television. I'm not trying to rush it. I can still hear a couple little pieces. Now it's quiet. We have sauce. Like I said, I started with a lot of wet ingredients in tonight's sauce. If you want to know what it looks like that, which is pretty darn edible. And now we get into the fun part. So I've got a pitcher full of this lovely sauce, which is pretty thick, but it's not runny, but it's not so thick that I could pour it out as salad dressing easily. And as I said, tonight I'm going to use it on the salad. But if I can get this right, now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the blender in the picture. Right, so I'm going to do that. You can see pretty well. And I'm going to do my, what did they say? They say you're not supposed to double dip, right? Like if you're at a party, you're not supposed to double dip. But in this case, you are. In this case, we're going to intentionally double dip. So I'm going to take my kale leaf. I'm going to dip it right in the blender. You could pour it out and put it in a bowl. You could apply this any number of ways, but I'm going to put it in the blender. Now, especially Cavolo Nero is curled. The leaves are curled. And so the sauce won't go in there unless you sort of open it. See here, it didn't even go in. So, but if I open up the curl a little bit, now it's gone all the way in. It's covered everything, but only half the leaf. So I'm going to grab it from the very bottom, shake off a little of the extra, grab it from the bottom. At this end, it won't fit, but I don't really care because I'm going to bend the kale into the dish. The leaf is, it's bendy. So I can bend it, put it in. When I pull it out, I now have a completely covered. I'm going to lay it down on my sheets that used to be called Teflex that are now called Paraflex sheets. And if I want to, I could even put a little more right into that little spot that the curl of the leaf stopped it from spreading into that spot. Hopefully you don't mind getting your hands just a little bit full of sauce. I'm not going to lick them, but the temptation is there. And then we just repeat. So I dip, it's pretty quick. I dip, quick shake, off we go. I always dip the stem end first. It's kind of like shoes, you always put the right one on first. Because then there's only one left. Sorry, couldn't help myself. So I always do the stem end first because that's easy to hold on to, and there's not a lot of sauce on the stem particularly. And then we just lay them out. The whole process is quick. As the blender starts going a little more empty, I might tip the blender. And as I say, you could, if you were so motivated, put it in another bowl. You could use a ladle and ladle it on. You could apply this any way you like. I have enough kale here so I can make a second tray as quickly as I made the first tray, which I will do with you guys because I'm sure you're doing the same thing at home. I don't know if you've ever, I had a friend look at this the other day and he go, "Oh, you didn't bother to cut the kale before you made kale chips." And he didn't realize that this is not curly kale. This is Cavolo Nero. It's a whole nother variety. And it would be a shame. It would be a shame to cut this into little pieces just to, everybody will, eating it this way is so much fun. You'll really enjoy it. I know you'll enjoy it. Plus the flavor is so good.
Doug?
Yes, ma'am.
What food combining what would be an ideal meal to have that with? I'm just sort of thinking from a food combining point of view and also from just a taste enjoyment sort of complementary.
Oh, I would always be eating this with either as a snack on its own, which is how it's usually done in my house. They just feel like they wanted to have something, so they have a few kale chips, and in this case, truly just a couple of chips, but otherwise a bowl of kale chips. But if I was going to serve it with a meal, it would always be the vegetable-y dinner meal. This will go with anything vegetable-y. Okay, so 2 trays, done. I actually have one more leaf, so I'm gonna stick it on by moving my sheets and make a little room at the bottom. I have a little more sauce and I have one more leaf, so we'll finish the process. I'm going to speed up the lecture portion as well so that we don't leave you guys hanging for hours. Even though I have fun going on and on, I know that you don't want me to. So we'll make that part quick. I don't want them really touching each other. If I can get away with laying them out without having them touch another kale piece, because they stick to each other rather vehemently, rather aggressively. And then when you go to take them off the dehydrator, they're stuck to each other, and you don't want that. Then they start breaking. I'm going to do a quick rinse of hands. Do a quick rinse of hands. My dehydrator, it turns out, is out of doors. I don't know if anybody else has this issue. My house is well enough insulated that if I have the dehydrator, my house is well enough insulated so that if I have the dehydrator in the house, all my upstairs windows get moisture on the inside. And then I start growing mold in the house. And I don't really want that. Hence, I built a box, and in the bottom part of the box, I store my citrus, which likes to be kept really cold anyway. In the upper part of the box, I have a door that opens, and the inside of that is my dehydrator. On top, I have an empty tile. I tiled the top, and I'll put things on there to work it as I'm taking things in and out. There's another side to it that's a series of shelves so that I can store things, whatever. So I have a little box right outside my back door which will someday be an additional room to the house that I can close. Someday that'll be my third portion of my kitchen. So I'll have a dining and that'll be work out there, machines and things. But at the moment it's not. And things dry out there. So everybody knows when they start walking towards the house, after we park the car and start walking towards the house, they go, ooh, I wonder what Daddy made tonight. They can smell it from a long way off. But that'll run all night out there and not be a problem. And tomorrow morning it will be kale chips, and they will end up looking like that. So mine are ready.
Dr. Graham, the sauce by itself is so delicious.
I'm going to leave the kitchen in a state I'm going to become Let's Cook Raw presenter. Hopefully that was a pace that you all could follow through just fine. And let's see what we can do now. Something else that's fun. Hi, everybody. I'm Doug Graham here with part infinite of Raw Food Nutrition 101. And I just
That was fun, Dr. Graham. That was so much fun.
Thank you, Larissa.
They look so amazing. Just look at them.
You know, I don't always I go months and sometimes years at a time without using my dehydrator, but sometimes I use it every day for a week or two. And I'm not attached. Some people will say, do you lose nutrition when you dehydrate? And I go, yeah, you lose nutrition when you dehydrate. I'm working with the most nutritious ingredients, the most nutritious foods. I'm really not worried about nutrition in any way, shape, or form. I got into raw food because I was worried about nutrition. But that was because I was eating standard American diet. I had every reason to be worried about nutrition. Now I'm eating fruits and vegetables. There's so much leeway for error that if I eat a dehydrated kale chip or I eat, some dehydrated vegetable ball or something, a burger, whatever, I'm still starting with fruits and vegetables. So people eat dates, that's dehydrated, and then they'll say, oh yeah, but you put food in and dehydrate. Anybody eats nuts, they've been dehydrated down to about 7% water, or else they go moldy in storage. So we have to be careful where we point our fingers, but I'm not worrying about the nutrition at this point. I'm just eating fruits and vegetables. And if I like to play with them once in a while, fine. I want you to be able to feel comfortable playing with them once in a while, specifically because of the things that are happening in tonight's lecture, which is that you want to please yourself when you eat. And it's a rare individual. I'll say I know they exist, but it's a rare individual who, once they get the swing of 80-10-10 and eating raw, it's a rare person that doesn't want to influence others to do the same because it's so good. As the old expression goes, come on in, the water's fine. So in this case, come on in, the food is so good that it's actually better than what I used to eat. I know lots of people go raw for lots of reasons, and that it very often has to do with your own personal health. And that's a driving factor. They're not eating mangoes and mangosteen and durian and mamey and all the delights of the summer because they taste so good. They're eating them because cooked food got them sick and they need to get away from cooked food. But once they break free of those chains, once they get out of the addictive phase of eating and start enjoying fruits and vegetables just because they taste so good, then you can see like, wow, you know what? This really is good on its own right. Okay, my health is good. I'm in a position where if I wanted to go back to eating cooked food, I could, but I don't want to. I don't miss it. Not only I don't miss it, but I like the results that occur when I eat my raw food. So I now get to make a choice. I like pizza, but I can have raw pizza. There's nothing I can't have a raw version of, but even then, if somebody said, oh, well, don't you miss a steak? Well, no, I don't miss a steak. And the things associated with it. Now, people talk about willpower, and I don't think there's any willpower involved. They talk about motivation, yeah. But the motivation isn't to eat raw. The motivation isn't to say, oh, well, just keep focusing on the mango or whatever. The motivation is to reach your specific goals, whatever they might be. Once you have goals, whatever they might be, then you do whatever you have to do to achieve those goals. End of story. And so for me, I want to feel rested after a night's sleep. I want to be able to play with my daughter. I want to be able to go out and lift with people 20, 30, 40, 50 years younger than me and not embarrass myself. I want to have fun. I want to have my clarity of mind. I don't want to have sniffles all the time. I want to have, just vibrant, good health for as long as I can sustain that. And part of doing that requires me to eat raw. That's just one of the ways I get there. Fine. I specifically want to keep my strength. And part of that requires me to lift heavy objects on occasion. Fine, so I do. It's not that I love doing it so much, but I love the results. And so you do it for the results. But we also want to influence others because a lot of different reasons why we want to influence others. I won't go into that psychology with you right now, but there's a lot of reasons why we want to be a force for good in other people's lives, why we want them to share the goodness with us. You know, it makes us feel a little more normal, but it also hopefully will help them in their lives and reaching their life goals. And so I want the food to be delightful. Something about the delivery of that big kale leaf, all dried, I can just take one bite. It actually doesn't tend to make a mess underneath, but I would say you're probably smart to eat it over a plate. But you could eat it outside at a picnic. It's not going to end up everywhere. It stays on the leaf. And there are many things that will make your food delightful that you can take advantage of when you're trying to influence others. As I said, I made an audio recording many, many years ago called Making Friends with Your Food. If you haven't ever watched Making Friends with Your Food, actually, it's a video series. If you haven't watched Making Friends with Your Food, I highly recommend it. It's a really good one. And every way that you can interpret that phrase, Rosie and I address every single one of the psychological issues and you making friends with actually eating your food, but also making friends in the outside world with your food. So many things you can do to influence it. It's not just that the food itself is delightful to eat, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it's also, I don't know if you've ever, there's a lot of controversy over eating durian, and some of the world's most pronounced famous food critics have given their descriptions of what eating durian is like to them. And one of them said it's like eating vanilla custard in a men's room. Another one said it's the taste of heaven, but the smell of hell. And we don't want those negative connotations in our food. So the ambiance, doesn't matter how nice the food is, in a men's room, it's not that nice. So you want to make the ambiance of where you eat, whatever it is you're serving, it's well worth it to you to have, whether that means a candle on the table or flowers on the table, or the curtains are drawn or not drawn, or what the kind of music you're listening to, or some people like to put an essential oil, an aroma. Do you put a tablecloth down? Is it just a random throw of plates and silverware, or is it an organized, like everybody's got similar stuff and it's arranged nicely, and are the napkins folded? And all of this makes a difference in the delight of the meal, as does the way in which you present the meal. I mean, Larissa came to Culinary Skills Week a few years ago, and at the end of that week, her group put on a party, and the way the food is presented, how many courses do you choose? How long? Have you ever been in a restaurant when there's just been an uncomfortably long pause in between one course and the next, and it's just too long, or it's too short? You haven't even finished eating and they're already bringing you out the next. The timing matters easily as much as the presentation. Fortunately, the timing works out pretty well, so that if Rosie's entertaining guests, I can serve them a course, get the entire next course ready, walk out, clear up the entire course, go in, do all the dishes, and bring out the next course. And then do it again and again as many times as we want to do that. And by the time the meal is done, so are all the dishes and everything's been put away, and by the time, it can work out well, but you want to consider the presentation. If you're going to serve a ton of fruit, you might want to have a 5 or a 10 minute pause before you get on to the next dish. It just gives that fruit a chance to move through a little bit. Make it as delightful an experience as you possibly can, which includes the shape and presentation of the food itself. Now, one time at Culinary Skills Week, we had everybody make sandwiches, and everybody made sandwiches. Different people use different things for the outside, whatever, it doesn't really matter at this point. But one guy wanted to make his sandwiches really simple. And so he used the cheek, essentially half of one mango, half of one tomato, half of one cucumber. And he put that in between a couple of lettuce leaves, top and bottom. Well, when you go to take a bite out of 3 round objects between lettuce leaves, they all just squirt out. So although it looked nice, it wasn't a delight to try to eat it because it was all squirting out the sides because it was round object on round object. There was no way to hold it together. You had to eat it with a knife and fork, at which point it was no longer a sandwich. So I leave it to you, but consider how to make your food delightful to eat. Different things delight different people. Some people like spaghetti with a knife and fork in short little pieces, and some people like twirling it around the fork. I'm not going to tell you what's going to make it a delight in your family, but you'll learn. But consider it. Having the right lighting, background noise, are the dogs barking, da 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 da. The next thing is, especially for others, but for you as well, is what I call recognition value. The recognition of what you're eating. Are you making a mock dish? Is it mock tuna? In which case it better be pretty darn close to tuna, or it's not going to have the effect, right, for the people who are expecting something that's going to remind them of tuna. But in every house, this is tough because in every house, mom makes tuna salad different. My mom always put chopped celery in the tuna salad, but I don't know if your mom did. Did your mom put chopped celery? Shake your head up and down if she did. No, if she didn't. No, she didn't even make tuna salad. Okay, you guys aren't playing along. But if you're going to make a mock dish, whatever that mock dish is, it better be pretty close. If I'm making spaghetti bolognese, I want it to really be spaghetti bolognese. Whether I use cucumber noodles or I use zucchini noodles, but I'm not going to use butternut squash noodles because it's not going to feel right. I might use butternut squash noodles for some other thing, but not for spaghetti per se, because that's not going to work. Okay, so I want it to be recognizable to the people I'm telling them what it is, which means if I'm telling them that it's a veggie ball, I want it to be in a ball shape. If I'm telling them it's a burger, I want it to be in a burger shape. Even though a ball and a burger are going to be identical in terms of ingredients, or could be, the shape determines what it is that you're giving a person. So if you make the shape really authentic, then they can recognize it and they know what to do with it. I walked past a Chinese restaurant one day. A long time ago, 40 years ago. I walked past a Chinese restaurant and the smell of garlic and sesame oil was so profound that when I walked into the restaurant and they said, "What do you want to eat?" I said, "I want to eat what I smelled outside." Whatever it was and they had no idea, and I had no idea. And back then I didn't even know, what I smelled outside, but it was definitely sesame oil and garlic. And I'm not using oil in my food. But if I take sesame oil, toasted sesame oil, no less, with that really strong sesame oil flavor, aroma, and I put a drop the tiniest smidge on my finger and put it on the underside of a plate, it's going to smell of sesame oil. And now I can serve a dish that's supposed to be a Chinese dish, and it's got the smell of toasted sesame. That's well on its way to delivering what we want to deliver. So I want the smell to be recognizable. I want the flavors to be recognizable. You know, if you're making a meatball in China, it's going to be sweet and sour. If you're making a meatball in or a sausage or something in the States, it's going to have certain, it's going to have fennel in it. If you're making the same thing in England, what do they put? Sage in it, I believe. So if you're going to make it recognizable, authentic, it's going to have that smell, flavor, shape. It's going to look like the real deal. Most of that goes a long way towards convincing people that they're getting what they're getting. So let's use all that to our advantage and be creative in the kitchen, like play around, have yourself a good time. And finally, I want to make the food, I want to make it really satisfying. I don't want people to walk away from my meal feeling like they need to go get a meal somewhere else. I don't want them coming back 30 minutes later going, I'm still hungry. That's not the desired outcome of a meal. The entire point of a meal is to satisfy your appetite. So how are we going to make the meal satisfying? Well, we're going to make it satisfying in a couple different ways. One, it's going to have enough volume. Two, it's got to have enough calories. Three, it wants to touch on many of your senses and be satisfying to your senses, to your mouth feel, to the look, to the smell, to the texture. But the critical factor in satiation is always going to be about glucose. It's going to come down to glucose because every cell of your body is fueled by glucose. You only carry a really small amount of glucose in your blood. There's got to be more coming in behind it, or you run out relatively quickly. We go into ketosis when we run out of available blood sugar. And that for most, for people on a raw food diet, that happens within 24 hours. So we want this sugar coming in relatively often throughout the day. And for me, I know that the way to make a meal satisfying is to put the sugar at the front end of the meal, to front load the sugar rather than rear load the sugar, because it's not going to digest as well at the end. There's not always going to be room at the end. So I either have a meal of fruit, or I start my meal with fruit, or I front load even further, give the fruit a head start. I might eat a liter or two of orange juice blended with mango. 2 liters, easy, sometimes 3 liters of orange juice blended with mangoes. For me, I'm super happy with that combination, but it could just be straight orange juice. I could just eat berries, or just eat orange, or just eat pineapple, or just eat fruit. And I'm pretty much making a meal of it. But not till I can't eat another bite, but enough so that I can then go do things for a little while, which could be an hour, and then sit down to a big vegetable meal. Now, I'm going to be down in Costa Rica running an educational event for a bunch of people who are attending for that reason, and also supervising a fast for people who are attending for that reason, before the yoga week, which I haven't announced until this very second. The announcement doesn't go out till tomorrow. Shh. But I believe it's already up on my website. We just haven't told anybody. But we're going to do a yoga week from the 12th I'm going to do a typical Dr. Doug Graham yoga week from the 12th of February until the 21st of February. That's a very long week. That's a good solid week of yoga in between travel days so that you don't miss out on anything. But we're going to do a raw food yoga week with Marina Grubik down in Costa Rica. For those of you who can't come to the fast, can't come to the educational port, but at that program, we have dinner and an educational class all combined. And so I don't get to take a break in between the fruit and the vegetable course. So I eat my fruit. I have whatever I have, a bunch of fruit or a bunch of pineapple or a big bowl of mango or a glass or 2 or 3 of juice. And then I just give it 5 minutes, just enough so that it's gone down a bit. I'm ready for salad, as is everybody else. And that makes the meal more satisfying than if you rush it, or if there's not enough sugar, if it's not pleasing all your senses, right? Like you just don't want there to be ongoing ruckus during the class, during the meal. And I've guaranteed that I'm eating enough calories to be satiated after the meal by the fruit that I have at the beginning of the meal. And I've guaranteed that I'm eating enough or a satisfying volume of food by having the vegetables, the salad, the cucumber noodles, the whatever it is. I'm jonesing for cucumber noodles, Costa Rican cucumbers. Oh, they make the best noodles of anywhere I've ever had them. But, guaranteeing that I get enough volume by eating vegetable matter at that meal, guaranteeing I get enough calories by having the fruit first. If you're trying to lose weight, or gain, we can talk about that another day. Here, we want to just make sure that we're delighted with what we're eating, and we're delighting everybody else by really making the eating experience a pleasant one. Sounds, lights, colors, flavors, smells, presentation, the entire ambiance of the place wants to be as wonderful as you can possibly imagine it when you're going to sit down to eat. It's well worth enjoying that from every level, or your stomach will tell you right away. Like you can lose your appetite just from an upset stomach, just because the music is scratchy or something, or whatever it is, or it's music you don't like. I used to play music that I adored, but my father said it sounded like somebody was dying. And I feel sorry for him. I made him eat meals listening to somebody dying. But, if you're not a Bob Dylan fan, well, so be it. And again, make it as recognizable, make it authentic. It doesn't have to be mock. I mean, I have a mold for putting vegetables inside a mold, and one of them is a cube. So I can make a cube-shaped salad and put it on a plate. Or I have another one that's a pyramid. I can make a pyramid-shaped salad and put it on the plate. But there is some recognition. People know what they're getting. If they see something burger-shaped, they expect a burger. You see something that looks like potato salad, they kind of expect it to taste at least reminiscent of potato salad, which is so easy to do. It's just so easy. And, if I'm serving Chinese food, I'm going to have a smell of Chinese food. If I want it to be English food, I'm going to have a smell of sage. And of course, let's make this meal as satisfying as we can in every way, with both not only all of your senses enjoying it, not only does it supply you with enough calories and volume, but it also supplies you with enough glucose, enough plain, just straight on sugar, so that you're not walking away from the meal going, I'm kind of craving this. I'm kind of looking around for that. I want something sweet. I want something heavy. I want some more food. I want, something rich. No, walk away satisfied by supplying enough glucose so people go, wow, that was it. I'm good. I'm golden. As am I, and I appreciate you staying with me for an extra 3 minutes as I ran over. I tried to tuck it all in.